Capital markets. If 1% of the money flows into Bitcoin, the price will be $174,000 per Bitcoin. It's 6:30 a.m. on Friday, February 17th, 2017. Yesterday I watched a video called 10 Reasons Bitcoin Price Will Destroy All-Time Highs in 2017. The all-time high was somewhere around $1,262, as I recall, but it depends on which exchange you're talking about. That figure comes from Mt. Gox, and Mt. Gox was not paying out any money or sending any Bitcoins. Mark Karpeles was too busy stealing the people's money because he was in charge of it. And so what is the all-time high for Bitcoin? It's in the neighborhood of $1,260 per Bitcoin, and that happened in November of 2013. We had two all-time highs that year. It was around $255 before it crashed, and that was in about March, April, somewhere in that time frame. Then it crashed and it went down to about $50. And then it went all the way up to $1,260 if you use Mt. Gox as the exchange. And today, we're at about $1,038 the last time I checked. And it's rising like a hot air balloon full of hot air. So while I was watching this video, the narrator, with an English accent, he said he's from the United Kingdom, he was giving his reasons why there is upward potential of Bitcoin. He also mentioned that the biggest threat was government. And we have differing factions there. We have the Russians and the Chinese who don't want a one-world government because they feel that they would just be a pawn and that someone else would be the king. And I agree. The hegemony must not be a dictatorship. And there are three dictators who want to be the king: Russia, China, and those who own and control the USA. I think they're mostly Europeans. Even if they're American citizens, they are mostly Europeans. Or from the Middle East. Because Israel has a tremendous influence over America. Some people say that Israel is the 51st state, and I'd say that Israel has one state, and that's the United States, in addition to the land that was stolen from the Palestinians by the British in 1948 and given to Israel. When you collect all the pieces to the puzzle and you start assembling them, you have to wind up with something that appears to be a great influence on the part of Israel over the USA. There are American citizens who have their first devotion to Israel, not the United States. And Donald Trump is the first one I would name because he is the current puppet president. And he's going to do exactly what he's told, and you can be sure that there will be some dealing from the bottom of the deck, and Israel will get all aces with this guy in the White House. Now back to my topic. The image you see on the screen right now, entitled Market Capitalization of Other Major Asset Classes. I have made many YouTube videos about Bitcoin. And I have mentioned these other asset classes, but I never had any figures. I just knew that money could flow out of these assets and into Bitcoin. And if this happened, the price of Bitcoin would go way, way up. Over $100,000 per Bitcoin. And it wouldn't take more than 1% to do that. And so in this video, I'm going to discuss each asset class, do a spreadsheet for you, take 1%, and show you what the price of Bitcoin would be if just 1% of those other asset classes were to flow out of them and into Bitcoin. Why would that happen, first of all? That's the first question you as a viewer have to ask. Why would money flow out of real estate? And I've answered this many times on many videos I did about Bitcoin. My videos are so positive about Bitcoin that YouTube is blocking them. Over the past 5 years, Bitcoin has grown in value 23,000%. And I did a video about it. At the time, it was $23,999, but Bitcoin was only $921 at that time. Now it's $1,038 as of February 17th, 2017. I have not checked the price this morning. At 6:30 this morning, I decided I'd rather do a video about this image that I saw, which is on your screen at this moment. So the question again, why would money flow out of, let's look at the first item on the list, commercial real estate? Why would money flow out of commercial real estate? Because the returns on Bitcoin have been at least 100% gain each year on average. We could go all the way back to 2009 when Bitcoin first came out and it was a nickel. But I don't think that would be fair. So I chose April of 2012 as the starting point, and Bitcoin was already $5. And today it's over $1,000. If from 1912 the price doubled every year, you would go from $5 in 2012 to $10 in 2013, $20 in 2014, $40 in 2015, $80 in 2016, and $160 in 2017. And is it $160? No, it's almost 10 times that. 6 or 7 times that. And so what I'm saying is true, that it's been doubling every year on average. Now, all the naysayers want to grab Bitcoin at its peak and show you what it is today and show you that it's a loser. But their argument is vanishing because the price is rising like a hot air balloon. To be fair, you need to draw a trend line. Bitcoin goes up and down. You cannot take the highest peak and compare it with today's price or any price. You have to take the trend line. You have to look at the average growth per day. It's 0.33% per day and rising. It's accelerating. So this author of this video that I watched yesterday, he pointed out his reasons why Bitcoin could smash the highest record it ever had, some $1,260, November 2013. So money could flow out of commercial real estate because people want a higher return. What is the return on commercial real estate? It is for sure less than 10% a year. Compare that with a rate 10 times that, and you can see why 1% could easily flow out of commercial real estate. It could flow out of residential real estate and the stock market. The people who control everything and rig all the markets want investors to get a mere 2% return in the stock market, and then they want their money, their cash, to be in the bank, and so they're outlawing cash, because they intend to steal part of that money every year. In the beginning, it will be 1 or 2% every year. That's called negative interest rates. And later, it will be 5 or 10%, and eventually 50%. They'll take half of the money you have in the bank every year. Because a good slave is a poor slave, and they have in mind for all of us to become slaves. And we must protest this and resist it with all our might, because a totalitarian dictatorship is what they want, and they have their opposition. Now, they have crushed Bitcoin in America. For every Bitcoin that goes to an American, 400 Bitcoins go to Chinese. And the Chinese know that Bitcoin, I'm talking about the Communist Party, they're the ones that rule with an iron fist in China. They know that Bitcoin is an invention, and it's an important one. They know that the blockchain is going to have its impact on every industry, a major impact. And so they're not killing Bitcoin, but they are trying to spray a little water on the fire. And every now and then, the Bank of China makes a big announcement, and Bitcoin crashes. And then it quickly rebounds because people want bargains. And when the price goes down, the big investors buy in. And the price goes even higher. I think we're going to see a runaway price very soon. And here's why. If 1% of the money from commercial real estate, that's 17 trillion, what's 1% of 17 trillion? Trillion is 10 to the 12th power. 1% would be the 10th power, right? So it's 17 to the 10th power. If the 9th power is a billion, then the 10th power is 10 billion. And 17 trillion times 0.01 has to be $170 billion. That's how much could flow into Bitcoin. How much is the capitalization of Bitcoin right this minute? It's only about 16 billion. So that would increase the price of Bitcoin tenfold right there. But that's not the biggest market. Narrow currency is nearly twice that. And when they outlaw cash, do you think that people want to have some cash that's not in their lousy, rotten banking system, where they tell you that your deposit no longer belongs to you? It belongs to the bank once you give it to the bank. So it's not your money anymore. And the Bankruptcy Reform Act of 2005 says if the banks gamble on derivatives and they lose, you have to pay. And that's true of 4 institutions: Citibank, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, and Goldman Sachs. All of them have about 70 trillion in outstanding liabilities on derivatives. Derivatives are a risky insurance policy that says, for example, that oil prices will not go higher. Or, here's another example, that interest rates will not go higher. If interest rates are forced higher in order to attract capital because the whole economy collapses, then the derivative bet is lost, and those big banks and Goldman Sachs, Citibank, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, they may have to rely on your deposit there in order to settle debts, actually gambling bets, using derivatives. And so here's the question: will fiat currency flow into Bitcoin as the fiats become worthless? And with QE, which is going on all over the world, we're in a currency war. The more fiat they print, the less each one is worth. We had a money supply of 800 billion. And then QE1, QE2, QE3 took place. And now we have a money supply that's about 3.2 trillion. And so that's 8 times as much. We're going to have QE4 because they have to. And they're going to further expand the money supply until the fiat is completely worthless. Now, do you think that people would gladly swap a fiat that's going down like the Titanic for some Bitcoins? Whereas the commercial real estate market is 17 trillion and 170 billion could flow into Bitcoin, that's 1%. It could also flow into Bitcoin from the fiat currencies. And there are 28 trillion of those floating around the world. And if 1%, 280 billion flowed into Bitcoin, the price of Bitcoin would be 18 times what it is. If 1% from commercial real estate and 1% from the currencies flowed into Bitcoin, you'd have $450 billion flowing into Bitcoin, which is 28 times as much capital. And so you would have 466 billion, and that would give Bitcoin a price of about $29,000 each. And I'm not saying that 1% will flow. I'm saying at least 10% will flow from all of these because of the return on investment. Why would you keep your money in real estate that doubles every 5 years or 10 years or 20 years when you can double every year with Bitcoin? Some people on this planet have hundreds of trillions of US dollars. If those who are wealthy today in fiat were to put all their money into real estate, it would cause a huge bubble in real estate. And when they sell, the IRS mafia will be there expecting their cut, which is unconstitutional. The 16th Amendment was passed when Congress was away for the holidays. We, the people of today, had nothing to do with this constitutional amendment, and we need to audit the IRS mafia and find out just where the money goes. If people flee both commercial and residential real estate, which doubles in price every 10 to 20 years, and opt out for Bitcoin, which has doubled every year since its inception in 2009, then there will be a whole lot of real estate for sale and no takers because capital is better off in Bitcoin doubling every year. We are going to see a rapid shift in wealth from those who have real estate to those who have Bitcoin, and nothing can stop this transfer of wealth. Those holding real estate will see their asset fall in value. Those holding Bitcoin will see a sudden rise in value. The losers are those who don't adapt to the decentralized currency worldwide. So, do I see upside potential on Bitcoin? Absolutely. Do I think you should invest? No, not yet. Not until you learn more, and that's why I'm making this video. Here's an answer you need to know. What makes Bitcoin safe? Another question, what makes Bitcoin risky? If you can't answer those two questions in detail and give an hour-long presentation on each, what makes Bitcoin safe has to do with the blockchain and capital investment and the number of nodes. And if you don't know that, you should not be investing until you know. And the other question, what makes Bitcoin risky? Government to me is the biggest risk. And if you don't understand why the NSA can take your Bitcoins, why the IRS mafia will take your Bitcoins, and why the government agencies will cooperate with each other like a conspiracy to take your Bitcoins, then you should not be investing. While I'm bullish on Bitcoin, I am not bullish on government. I see them as a totalitarian dictatorship worldwide. The deeds they are committing are atrocities. Look up the Clinton Foundation and look what they're doing in Asia, the Middle East. Middle East is Asia. There is no continent, the Middle East. It's Middle East Asia. Where do you get the information that tells you what government is doing? You go to George Webb. He's a journalist, a reporter, and he does a storyboard to make all the connections for you. He's got at least 100 videos, and he's making more every day. I think you should watch all of them before you invest in Bitcoin. And then you should watch all the gurus who profess Bitcoin. And make notes on all of them and write down your questions, because if you don't have 1,000 questions, you're not a researcher. You're not an investor. I worked with investors for 25 years. I know investors. I know how they think. I know what they do. They study. They master the material. If you give them a test, they would score 100%. And that's what I want you to do if I'm going to give you advice. My advice is to study, not to invest until you have mastered the material and you can proudly say, I know more than anyone on the planet. Because when you gamble your money and lose it, you have to start over. And some of you are too old to start over. So you need to be smart the first time. Let's continue. Global stock markets add another 70 trillion, which is more than all the previous ones mentioned together. And the global bond debt market is 200 trillion. It's more than everything on the page, except global bond debt markets. And then at the bottom, the gold market is a $10 trillion market. Let's now go to the spreadsheet. I set up the spreadsheet to take 1% of the value of all of those markets. And they're all rigged markets, by the way. The gold market is rigged. The fiat market is rigged. The bond and debt markets are rigged. The stock market is totally rigged. The forex market is rigged, which is a currency market. residential real estate is a bubble, which means that commercial real estate is also a bubble. And when these collapse, money is going to flee out of these markets just before the collapse. And guess who's going to get out? The big guys. Because they know what's coming. They know what's going on, and the guy that's going to be left holding the bag or the title to the residential and commercial real estate is the little guy. He always gets killed. So column C takes 1% of each of these capital markets asset classes, and 1% is just an arbitrary number. I want it to be ultra, ultra, ultra conservative, because the real numbers are likely to be 50%. 50% of the money that's in the commercial real estate market will flow out and into Bitcoin. Why? Because Bitcoin is the transfer. Bitcoin is the future. Bitcoin is the way that all governments are going to be operated. It's going to be decentralized. And who is leading this? China. China will very soon be the world's #1 economy as the U.S. slides down the hill to become a third world country. You're going to see Americans working for $5 an hour. They will have to abandon minimum wage. You will find some Americans working for $2 an hour. And that $2 will buy nothing. Because the thieves have ruined this country. And they're never satisfied with having all the money in the world. They also have a gluttonous appetite for power. How much power? Endless power. And nuclear war lies ahead as a result. And if Hillary Clinton was elected in 2016, we would have had nuclear war with Russia immediately, because that's what the CFR wants. And if you don't know how the CFR controls everything, then you don't know much about this country or the world. If you don't know who the CFR members are, whether their name is on the official list or not, then you don't know much about what's going on in the world. But if just a tiny, tiny 1% of each of these asset classes were to flow into Bitcoin, you'd have 3.65 trillion more. And what is the current capitalization of Bitcoin? 16 billion. The current capitalization added to 1% of those asset classes barely puts a dent in the total. Instead of 3.65, it's 3.66. And so the upward potential with just 1% flowing into Bitcoin gives a capitalization of 3.666 trillion. Now divide that by the total number of Bitcoins that will ever be in existence. There are only 16 million out right now. There will be 21 million almost. By the year 2140, we'll all be dead by then. But take the 3.66 trillion, divide it by a very conservative 21 million, which we're not there yet, and you get $174,571 per Bitcoin. Is this what Bitcoin will be in the future? I have no idea. I'm looking at what's possible. What is quite possible is 1% of those assets being liquidated and put into Bitcoin. Just 1%. I think it makes total sense to pull all the money out of Goldman Sachs, all the money out of the stock market, and put it into Bitcoin now before the markets crash. Will hedge funds do this? Will institutional investors do this? Absolutely. As soon as they get a green light from Bitcoin, showing that Bitcoin is now stabilized. It is too young and erratic. It's like a 15-year-old kid. All over the place. And when the kid turns 16 and gets a driver's license, he's driving all over the place. Spending money wildly. And Bitcoin is even younger than a 16-year-old. Bitcoin is a fetus. if you want to know the truth. Some people are saying, quite ridiculously, is it too late to invest in Bitcoin? It's a fetus. It just came out in 2009. You could buy the first Bitcoin in 2009 for about a nickel or so. I don't remember. Might have come out at a penny. I don't remember. I first heard about Bitcoin in March, I think it was March 28th, 2013, from Stefan Molyneux. He was talking about how great it is. I heard the idea and I said, that is a great idea. And I've been studying Bitcoin intensely ever since. I read everything I can. I listen to everything I can. And I heard the famous quotes from all the so-called leaders. I heard what Jamie Dimon said about Bitcoin. I heard what Bill Gates said about Bitcoin. I heard what Alan Greenspan said about Bitcoin. Bill Gates is the only one who has the computer mind and understands that Bitcoin is the future of money. One thing I'm very happy to see is the lack of belief by the people who belong to the Federal Reserve Group, the U.S. currency group, the people at the top of the biggest banks. I'm glad to see they don't believe in Bitcoin. Because as this wealth transfer takes place, all of their money is going to become Bitcoin money because their money is going to zero value. And they think they're going to force us into their banks. And I think Bitcoin is the monster that's going to eat them alive. They are going down in a sinking ship, and they knocked the holes in the boat. They torpedoed their own boat. They fired the torpedoes, and the torpedoes went out. They turned, they came back, and they hit their own boat, and now their boat is sinking. You're going to see the four biggest entities, or banks, investment companies that I just mentioned. Let me repeat. Goldman Sachs will go down like the Titanic. Bank of America, Citibank, and Wells Fargo. They're all going to be Titanics. Everybody who has money in those three banks and Goldman Sachs is going to lose it because of the Bankruptcy Reform Act of 2005. And if you want to know a lot about it from someone who knows more than anybody I know, listen to Ellen Brown, attorney in Los Angeles. She has videos on YouTube. She knows more than anybody about this topic. And she wants to fix it because she sees what they did to ruin the entire system with their greed. Ellen Brown, a very wise attorney and an altruist as well. So there's the scenario. If 1% of these asset classes, commercial real estate, residential real estate, the stock markets worldwide, the worldwide bond and debt markets, the fiat currencies of the world and the Forex market and the gold market. If 1% flowed out of each of those, just 1%, Bitcoins would have a value of $174,000 each. And that's figuring on the full number of 21 million, and we're not there. We're at 16 million, and it's going to take over 100 years for the rest of those Bitcoins, some 5 million, to be released. And so the capitalization today is 16 billion. You would divide 3.666 trillion by 16 million in order to arrive at the price of Bitcoin. It's probably over $200,000 per Bitcoin. But 1%, again, is not the limit. It is a conservative number. And I'm not the only one who saw it. I gathered this information by watching other people talk about Bitcoin and point this out. And they are exactly right. What if everybody abandoned real estate, commercial and residential, and they put their money in Bitcoin because it doubles every year? Would you own a house if it's doubling every 10 years, 20 years? Or would you own Bitcoin that doubles every year? You could sell your house this year, invest in Bitcoin for 1 year, sell half your Bitcoins and buy your house back, and continue with Bitcoin forever. I think people are going to see the sense of doing that. And they're going to see it in stocks, bonds, commercial real estate, fiat currency, and the gold market. And what's going to drive it? The war on capital. The war on cash. Confiscation of your wealth by government. That's going to drive this engine to Bitcoin. People are going to stampede to Bitcoin because of what they're doing to their own boat. They're torpedoing their own boat. And they will all go down. Why would you own real estate when you can double your money every year with Bitcoin? Okay, I've made my point. Thanks for watching. See you next time.